Was I here? So we're back to where, Maggie, oh, right. She was going back to the castle. Not the castle. She was going back to Capricorn's village with who? That's what we've got to figure out. Because I'm pretty sure Mo had just been, not really kidnapped, but like he kind of went willingly, right? To try to go back and get the last copy of the book. So she's with Finoglio and Basta. Okay, so I don't really know what's going on. Bruh. Okay. I was gonna go back and like find the last YouTube video, but I'm not gonna do that. I'm just gonna look. Don't skip the turtle. This is with Dustfinger and Farad. I don't know if Mo's with them. I don't think so. I'm pretty sure that Mo is back at Capricorn's village, and Dustfinger and Farad are together. And then Maggie is with Finoglio and Eleanor. Maybe. Yeah, okay, here's where Maggie gets picked up. So, blah, 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 blah. I'm just not seeing where Eleanor is. You guys remember where Eleanor has gone? Alright, this is whenever Mo was telling Maggie, if it wasn't for you, I'd go back too. Because Finoglio and Farad had already left. They left first to go back to the village. So, like, after all was said and done, right, they had left the Capricorn's village, the evil place, the bad place, scary place. And they all went back. They were supposed to have all been going home, but Mo decided to go to Finoglio, which is the author. He's going to his house to go and, like, see if he had another copy of the book since he lost it, which he did not. So then from there, Farad and Dustfinger left together to go back to the village. Then Mo decided he was going to go back to the village too. But I don't know who he went with or if he just went by himself. Here's where Eleanor had called while they were all at Finoglio's house. She was like, blah, 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 talking and stuff. And okay. So Eleanor's back at her house. Eleanor's going to set out on her own adventure, probably go save everybody because she's all by herself. So Eleanor went to her house, right? And that's whenever she discovered that, like, all of her books had been burned. Tragic. So she decided, like, she's going to leave. She's pissed. And Mo, I believe, just went by himself. Honestly, I'm really not sure what has happened with that. You guys still here? That was Eleanor. Maggie's aunt. Blah, blah, blah. Eleanor's flying back. Mo's supposed to go pick her up at the airport. So that's what happened. Mo left to go pick up Eleanor at the airport. And then Basta and Flatnose, the evil guys, showed up at the house and kidnapped Maggie and Finoglio. Okay. So everybody's going back to the village at this point. They're all about to meet up. So everybody's separated, but they're all about to meet up back at the village. They just all don't know it. Like, neither of the groups, like the 3 groups of people that are separated, know. There's Mo, Maggie's dad, Eleanor, Maggie's aunt, old aunt, Dustfinger's the character from the book that got escaped, Farad's from another got escaped, and they, like, latched onto each other because they're both like souls, whatever you call that. So I'm pretty sure we're a chapter ahead, but I'm gonna go ahead and start back here at chapter 32 called Back Again, where they end up back at the village. I think that's just like a good place to start off or something. Is everything good? Is lighting good? Is everything good? Right on time for the synopsis. Hell yeah. And we're about to start. I'm starting a chapter behind from last time because it's been a good minute. Okay. So for those of you who are new or have never read these books or anything, never heard anything about them, it's called Inkheart. And there's 2 more books afterwards, Ink Spell and Ink Death. We're on chapter 32, we're over halfway through. And, like, each chapter has a beginning like this. It's like an excerpt from another book or some poetry or, like, a quote or just something from another story. And it's kind of like a foreshadowing of what's about to happen in the chapter. So this one's from The Secret of Platform 13 by Eva Ibbotson. She spoke to the king, hoping he would forbid his son to go, but he said, "Well, dear, it's true that adventures are good for people even when they are very young. Adventure can get into a person's blood even if it doesn't remember having them." Okay. Capricorn's village didn't look like a dangerous place on the gray rainy day when Maggie set eyes on it again. The houses standing among the green hills were a miserable sight with not a ray of sunlight to brighten their ruins. Maggie could hardly believe those same houses had looked so menacing on the night of their escape. "Interesting," whispered Finoglio as Basta drove into the parking lot. "Do you know this village is very like one of the settings I thought up for Inkheart? Well, there's no fortress, but the landscape around is similar. And that's weird. They spelled similar wrong. Unless I think it's spelled wrong. And the age of the village would be about right. Did you know that Inkheart is set in a world not unlike our own medieval times? Of course I added some things, the fairies and the giants. Maggie wasn't really listening to them now. She remembered how, after the flight from the sheds where Capricorn had held them captive, she had stumbled towards Eleanor's car and the man shot at them. She had hoped she would never again have to see this parking lot, the church, and these hills. "Come on, get moving," grunted Flatnose, opening the door. I expect you remember the way." Oh yes, Maggie could remember, even though it did all rather seem different today. Finoglio looked around the gloomy alleys like a tourist, staring at the windows and open doors as if he'd paid for entry. "I know this village," he whispered to Maggie. "I mean, I've heard of it. There's more than one sad story about the place. That earthquake in the last century, and then in that last war there was..." "Save your tongue for that later, scribbler," Basta interrupted. "I don't like whispering." I have hiccups. Where's my water? Finoglio shot him an angry glance, but fell silent and did not utter another word until they had reached the church. "Well, go on, open the door. What are you waiting for?" growled Flatnose. With Finoglio's help, Meggie opened the heavy wooden door. The cool air that met them smelled as musty as on the day she had entered the church with Mo and Eleanor. Nothing much had changed inside. The red walls looked even more threatening on this overcast day, and the expression on the doll-like face of the Capricorn statue seemed even more malevolent than before, if that were possible. The fireplaces in which the books had been burned still stood in the same place, but there were no sign of Capricorn's chair at the top of the steps. Two of his men were just carrying a new chair up then. The old woman who looked like a magpie and who Meggie didn't really like to remember was standing beside them, impatiently giving directions. Basta pushed aside two women who were kneeling in the middle of the nave, cleaning the floor, and strode toward the altar steps. "Where's Capricorn, Mortola?" he called to the old woman as he approached. "I have news for him, important news." The old woman didn't even turn toward him. "Farther to the right, you fools," she ordered the two men who were still struggling with the heavy armchair. "Yes, there, that'll do." Then she turned toward Basta and had What? Then she turned toward Basta, her face expressionless. "We expected you back before this," she said. "What do you mean?" Basta had raised his voice, but Meggie caught the uncertainty it revealed. It sounded almost as if he were afraid of the old woman. "Do you know how many villages there are down this damn coast? And we weren't even sure whether Silver Tongue was still in the area. But I can rely on my nose, and as you see," he said, nodding in Maggie's direction, "I've done the job." "You have." The magpie looked past Basta to where Meggie and Finoglio were standing with Flatnose. "All I see is the girl and an old man. Where's her father?" "He wasn't there, but he'll come after her. The girl is the best bait we could have." "And how will he know she's here?" "I left him a message." "Since when can you write?" Meggie saw Basta's shoulders tense with anger. "I left him my name. He won't need more than that to know where to find his precious little daughter. Tell Capricorn I'm shutting her in one of the cages." With these words, he turned on his heel and stalked back to Meggie and Finoglio. "Capricorn's not here, and I don't know when he'll be back," Mortola called after him. "But I'm in charge until then, and in my view, you haven't been doing your job recently as well as expected." Basta swung around as if he had been bitten on the back of the neck, but Mortola continued unmoved. "First, you let Dustfinger steal a set of keys from you, then you lose our dogs, and we have to send a search party out into the mountains for you, and now this. Give me your keys." The magpie put out her hand. "What?" Basta went white, like a boy being punished in front of the whole class. "You heard. I'm going to look after them. The keys to the cages, the crypt, and the fuel store. Bring them here." Basta didn't move. "You've no right to them," he snapped. "Capricorn gave them to me, and he's the only one who can take them away again." He turned around once more. "And so he will," Mortola called after him, "and he'll expect your report as soon as he gets back. Maybe he'll understand better than I do why you didn't bring Silvertongue." Basta did not reply. Seizing Meggie and Finoglio by the arms, he hauled them toward the church door. Mortola the magpie called something after him, but Meggie couldn't make out what it was, and Basta did not turn back this time. He locked her and Finoglio in the shed marked number 5, the one where Ferret had been imprisoned. "Okay, you can wait here till your father arrives," he said before pushing Meggie inside. She felt as if this were a nightmare and she was dreaming it all over again. Only here there wasn't even a musty straw to sit, and the light bulb hanging from the ceiling didn't work. Although a little daylight did come in through the narrow hole in the wall. I thought that was going somewhere. "Oh, wonderful," said Finoglio, sitting down on the cold floor with a sigh. "A cowshed. How unimaginative. I really would have expected Capricorn to at least have a proper dungeon for his prisoners." "Cowshed?" Meggie leaned her back against the wall. She heard the rain pattering against the locked door. "Well, yes. What did you think it was? They always built houses like this in the old days. Room for the livestock on the ground floor and living quarters for the family above them. They still keep their goats and donkeys like that in many mountain villages. Haven't you noticed when they're driven the animals out to the pasture in the morning, there are steaming heaps of dung left lying in the streets, and you tread in them when you go to buy your breakfast rolls?" Finoglio plucked a hair from one nostril, looked at it as if he couldn't believe anything quite so brusquely grew on his nose, and flicked it away. "This is really rather uncanny," he murmured. "That's exactly how I imagined Capricorn's mother. That nose, the eyes set close together, even the way she folds her arm jets forward." Maggie looked at him incredulously. "Capricorn's mother? The magpie?" "Magpie? Is that what you call her?" Finoglio laughed softly. "She has exactly the same nickname in my story. How amazing. Be careful of her. She's not a very pleasant character." "I thought she was his housekeeper." "That's probably what you're supposed to think, so keep our little secret to yourself for now, all right?" Maggie agreed, although she didn't really understand. What did it matter who the old woman was? It all came to the same thing. This time there was no dust finger to open the door in the night. It had all been for nothing. As if they had never run away at all. She went over to the locked door and pressed her hands against it. "He'll come," she whispered. "Mo will come, and then they'll lock us up here forever and ever." Finoglio got up and went over to her. "There, there," he said, putting his arms around her and letting her bury her face in his jacket. It was made of rough fabric and smelled of pipe tobacco. "I'll think of something," he whispered to Maggie. "After all, I invented these villains. It'll be an odd thing if I can't get rid of them. Your father had an idea, but—" Maggie raised her face, wet with tears, and looked at him hopefully, but the old man shook his head. "Later. Now tell me what makes Capricorn so interested in your father. Is it something to do with the way he reads aloud?" Maggie nodded and wiped the tears from her eyes. "He wants Mo to read aloud to him here, to bring someone out of a book, an old friend." Finoglio gave her a handkerchief. A few crumbs of tobacco fell from it when she blew her nose. "A friend? Capricorn has no friends." The old man frowned. Then Maggie felt him suddenly take a deep breath. "Who is it?" she asked, but Finoglio just mopped a tear off her cheek. "Someone I hope you'll never have to meet except between the covers of a book," he said evasively, and then he turned and began pacing up and down. "Capricorn will be back soon," he added. "I must think how best to confront him." But Capricorn did not come. Darkness fell outside, and still no one had fetched them from their prison. They weren't even brought anything to eat. It grew cold when the night air came in through the hole in the wall, and they huddled side by side on the hardwood floor to keep them warm. On the hard floor to keep warm. It's probably concrete, so don't be getting that confused because I'm stupid. "Is Justice still very superstitious?" Finoglio asked at some point in the night. "Yes, very," replied Maggie. "Dustfinger likes taunting him about it." "Good," murmured Finoglio, but he would say no more. Okay, we're on chapter 33. I mean, I think we're just back where we actually were now. Oh, what book am I reading? Inkheart. Okay, Capricorn's Maid, chapter 33. I need some lip balm before we keep it going. I forgot I was gonna smoke weed before we read, but I would have a really dry mouth too. A book in mind after this one? We're gonna read number 2. This is a 3-part, it's a trilogy. It's Inkheart, Ink Spell, and then Ink Death. And they're books about a book. All 3 books are about this book, Inkheart. It's like a book within a book. A story within a story. Like a book about a book that someone reads aloud. And then the whole rest of the story is about reading aloud the book. So, like, it's trippy the way, because I'm reading it out loud, and this is a book about books being read out loud, and it's just, it's weird. But, yeah, okay, this excerpt is from Charles Dickens' Great Expectations. "As I never saw my father or my mother, my first fancies regarding what they were like were unreasonably derived from their tombstones. The shape of the letters on my father's gave me an odd idea that he was a square, stout, dark man with curly black hair. From the character and turn of the inscription, also Georgiana, wife of the above. I drew a childish conclusion that my mother was freckled and sickly. Does all that she got on her tombstone also that... I swear to God, if I die and all I get is a, oh, and also, what? No, absolutely not. Also, Georgiana, wife of the above. That's a no. Could fall asleep listening to you read. People do. I used to read more closer to bedtime, but like that's hard to do because everybody's bedtime is different. Y'all are all over the whole world. But I used to read closer to bedtime, and then people would use it to sleep. But I do also have VODs of the books on YouTube, like of all my previous readings, so you could always just play it at night later. Okay. Dustfinger set out when the night grew cold. Or, what? I'm stupid. Oh, you want to see a little bird? There's pictures on some of the pages. Like, not a lot, but like at the end of chapters and at the beginning of some, there'll be a little, drawing. Near Paris? What time is it there? That's crazy. Always help out around the house. There's not a lot of room. I don't have a house. And I'm not in a much better weather either. It's probably just prettier in Alaska right now. Okay, for real, we're reading. Dustfinger set out when the night could go no darker. The moon showed occasionally between the clouds, as thin as a slice of lemon. Dustfinger was glad of such darkness, but the boy jumped whenever a twig brushed his face. For heaven's sake, I should have left you with the marten after all, Dustfinger snapped as Ferret clutched his arm in fright yet again. You'll give us away with your teeth chattering. Look ahead of you. That's what ought to scare you. Guns, not ghosts. Before them, only a little way off now, lay Capricorn's village. The new floodlights poured light as bright as day over the gray houses. And they say this electricity of theirs is a blessing, whispered Dustfinger as they skirted the parking area. A bored-looking guard was strolling around among the parked vehicles. Yawning, he leaned against the truck, which Cockerel had used to bring the goats back that afternoon, and put on a pair of headphones. That's a weird way to write that. So, like, the bad guys, I feel like I have to keep refreshing because it's been so long since I read, and, like, a lot of you are, like, totally new from Kick, like, have never been a part of the book yet, so, like, all of the bad guys, Capricorn's main bad guy, the other bad, like, his henchmen, whatever, are Basta, Flatnose, Cockerel. There might be another one, but I forget, and also I think one has already died, so... I don't know. 10:34 p.m. It's 2:36 here right now. Middle of the day. That's crazy. So it is bedtime over there. And all of the good guys or whatever are... Main characters were Mo and his daughter Maggie. Eleanor's their aunt, who lives far away. They went to visit her in her house. This all takes place in, like, Italy-ish, if that gives y'all anything. I've always imagined Mo as, like, a dark-skinned man with, like, thick black hair. But, like, he is not. Like, y'all, I guess, really, you could picture him however you want. But, like, if you really want to, like, a look and a feel for the characters that's supposed to be accurate-ish... there is a movie, Inkheart. They made it into a movie. You could go on there. Brandon Fraser plays Mo, actually. So, yeah, not a dark-skinned, thick, black-haired man. But that's still who I picture, like, to this day. Like, I've read the book so many more times than I've seen the movie, so, like, I've got all my own images for the people. But, yeah, so, like, in my head, they're all different. I've got weird, like, different characters. Like, I always just imagined that, like, for some reason, like, Maggie was, like, a mixed race child with curly black hair. And Mo was, like, dark, and I don't really know about the mom. I just kind of imagine her with, like, kind of, like, lightish skin and black hair that's long. That's all I really think about. And that's, like, in my head what they look like. Then there is, okay, so all of the characters besides those three, Eleanor, Mo, and Maggie, they were all from the books. Like, because I feel like I'm giving y'all spoilers, but, like, I'm not. We've already read it, so I'm just giving y'all a recap. So, like, Mo reads characters aloud out of books, and he, like, long ago, he read his wife, Maggie's mom, into a book and read Dustfinger out. Dustfinger has a pet marten that looks like a ferret with horns. And Ferret is like kind of a relatively new character in the past few chapters. He came from a new book after Mo was forced to read a new book for Capricorn, which is the main bad guy who came out of another book. So on the night that Mo found out he had powers and whatever and read Maggie's mom into the books, he read out like 3 bad guys. He read out Capricorn and like his henchmen, and then he read out Dustfinger, he's a neutral character. He's not good or bad. Dustfinger's neutral. And Ferret came from like a Arabian Nights book, I think, or something like that. So yeah, and then those are all the main characters, and then Finoglio is the author of the book that is like the book that they read everybody out of. Finoglio has grandkids. They're all mentioned. I don't really think I need to recap, but, like, yeah. So that's who's in our story right now. Okay, I really did not feel like doing that, but, like, I feel like that helps with you guys. I'm glad I did. My dog, I have no idea. I think she's a part Westie and Jack Russell, but it's purely my speculation. I got her from down the road at a Mexican man's house whenever I lived in Kansas. So, where was I? Okay, whatever. Cockerel was... No. Dustfinger was walking into the village with Ferret. And they say this electricity of theirs is a blessing, whispered Dustfinger as they skirted the parking area. A bored-looking guard was strolling around among the parked vehicles. Yawning, he leaned against the truck, which Cockerel had used to bring the goats back that afternoon, and put on a pair of headphones. Excellent. An army could march up now and he wouldn't hear it, muttered Dustfinger. If Boster were here, he'd discipline that man for that, shut him up in Capricorn's cowsheds for 3 days with nothing to eat. Why don't we go over the rooftops? All the fear had gone from Ferret's face. Hey, that's for subscribing, right? Thanks for subscribing! Thank you, Offstreet! The guard with his shotgun didn't alarm the boy half as much as his imaginary ghosts. Dustfinger could only shake his head over such foolishness. But the rooftop idea wasn't stupid. A vine that hadn't been pruned in years grew up one of the houses beside the parking area. As soon as the guard wandered over to the other side of the area, swaying in time to the music that was filling his ears, Dustfinger clambered up to its woody branches. The boy climbed even better than he did, and proudly offered him a hand once he was up on the roof. They moved on stealthily like stray cats, past chimneys, aerials, and Capricorn's floodlights, which were angled down and left everything behind them in a cover of darkness. Once the shingle came loose under Dustfinger's boots, but he managed to catch it just in time before the terracotta tile could fall and break in the street below. When they reached the square where the church and Capricorn's house stood, they let themselves down from a gutter. For a few breathless moments, Dustfinger ducked behind a stack of empty fruit crates, looking out for guards. Both the square itself and the narrow alley to one side of Capricorn's house were bathed in sunlight. A black cat was sitting on the edge of the well outside the church. Where am I? Basta's heart would probably have missed a beat at the sight of it, but Dustfinger was much more concerned about the guards outside of Capricorn's house. Two of them were lounging by the entrance. It was one of these, a small, sturdy man who had found Dustfinger 4 years ago in a town up in the north. Just as he was about to give his last show, he and 2 companions had dragged the Fire Eater back here, where Capricorn had, in his own characteristic way, questioned him about Silvertongue in the book. The 2 guards were arguing, and as they were so absorbed, Dustfinger plucked up his courage, took a few rapid steps, and disappeared down the alley beside Capricorn's house. Farid followed him as soundless as his own shadow come to life. Capricorn's house was a large, bulky building, which might once have been the village hall, a disused monastery, or a school. All the windows were dark, and there were no other guards to be seen in the alley. But Dustfinger remained watchful. He knew the guards liked to lurk in dark doorways, invisible as ravens in the night, in their black suits. Indeed, Dustfinger knew almost everything about Capricorn's village. He had walked these streets often enough since Capricorn brought him here to look for Silvertongue in the book. Whenever he felt the sharp pangs of homesickness, he had come back here to his old enemies, where he didn't feel quite so out of place. Even his fear of Basta's knife couldn't keep him away. Why don't I have my activity in here? Kind of weird. So it made the subscription noise, but I don't know where it came from. Oh, that's Twitch. Is on the right side. Okay, well now I'm super confused. I guess I need to read though and stop trying to figure that out, but yeah, no, thanks for subscribing, Off Street. Get back to my chat. I'm super confused. I can at least kind of see you guys. Okay. Where am I? What? He had walked these streets often enough since Capricorn brought him here, blah, 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 blah. Even his fear of Basta's knife couldn't keep him away. I'm just gonna read from the top of this page, because I kind of lost my place. I don't even know what happens here, guys. I just keep getting confused and, like, distracted. There's the word. Not confused, but, well, yeah. Oh, I'm doing it again. Dustfinger picked up a flat stone, beckoned Farid to his side, and threw the stone down the alley. Nothing moved. As he had hoped, the guard was doing his rounds. Dustfinger hurried to the high behind which Capricorn's garden lay. Vegetable beds, fruit trees, and herbs protected by the wall from the cold wind that sometimes blew from the nearby mountains. Dustfinger had often entertained the maids as they hoed the beds. I know what they mean, but that's... There were no floodlights in the garden, no guards either. Who'd steal vegetables? And only a door with a grating over it, a door that was locked at night, led from the yard into the house. The dog kennels lay beyond the wall too, but when Dustfinger swung himself up and over, they were empty. The dogs had not come back from the hills. They'd shown more sense than Dustfinger expected. I have hiccups again. And Basta obviously hadn't gotten new dogs yet. Stupid of him. Stupid Basta. Dustfinger signaled to the boys to follow him and stole past the carefully tended beds until he had reached the back door with the grating. The boy looked at him questioningly when he saw the solid bars, but Dustfinger just laid a finger to his lips and looked up at one of the windows on the second floor. The shutters, black as night, were open. Dustfinger mewed in so lifelike a fashion that several cats answered, but nothing moved behind the window. Dustfinger cursed under his breath, listened to the sounds of the night for a moment, and then imitated the shrill cry of a bird of prey. Farid jumped and pressed close to the wall of the house. This time something did move behind the upstairs window. A woman leaned out of it. When Dustfinger waved to her, she waved back, then quickly disappeared. "Don't look like that," whispered Dustfinger, seeing Farid's anxious glance. "We can trust her. Quite a few of the women aren't too fond of Capricorn and his men. Many of them didn't even come here of their own free will. But they're all afraid of him, afraid they'll lose their jobs, afraid he'll burn the roofs over the heads of their families if they talk about what goes on here. Or perhaps send Basta to call on them with his knife. Risa doesn't have to worry about that kind of thing. She has no family. Not anymore," he added to himself silently. Who? Risa. The door behind the grating opened, and Risa's anxious face appeared behind the bars. It looked pale beneath her dark blonde hair. "How are you?" Dustfinger went over to the grating and put his hand through the bars. Smiling, Risa pressed it and nodded at the boy. "This is Farid." Dustfinger lowered his voice. "You could say he's adopted me, but you can trust him. He doesn't care for Capricorn any more than we do." Risa nodded, looked at him reproachfully, and shook her head. "Yes, I know it wasn't sensible to come back. You heard what happened?" Dustfinger couldn't prevent something like pride from creeping into his voice. "They thought I'd put up with anything, but they were wrong. There's still one copy of the book left, and I'm going to get my hands on it. Don't look at me like that. Do you know where Capricorn keeps it?" Risa shook her head. There was a rustling behind them, and Dustfinger spun around, but it was only a mouse scurrying over the quiet yard. Risa took a pencil and a piece of paper out of her dressing gown pocket. She wrote slowly and neatly, knowing that Dustfinger found it easier to read capital letters. She had taught him how to read and write so they could communicate with one another. This is sounding suspicious. As usual, it took some time for the letters to make sense to Dustfinger. He felt a fresh sense of pride every time those spindly symbols finally fitted together into words and he could get their secret out of them. "I'll look around," he read softly. "Good, but be careful. I don't want you risking your pretty neck." He bent over the paper again. "What do you mean? The magpie has Basta's keys now?" That's what it reads. Like the note, she said. "The magpie has Basta's keys now." He gave her the note back. Farid watched Risa writing, as spellbound as if he were watching someone work magic. "I think you'll have to teach him too," Dustfinger whispered through the bars. "See how he's staring at you?" Risa looked up and smiled at Farid. Awkwardly, he looked away. Risa passed her fingers around her face. "Do you think he's a nice boy?" Dustfinger twisted his mouth in a teasing smile. While Farad felt so embarrassed he didn't know where to look. And what about me? Beautiful as the moon, am I? What am I supposed to make of that compliment? You mean I have almost as many craters? I don't know why I just said question mark. It's like reading it like a fucking text. Risa pressed her hand over her lips. It was easy to amuse her. She laughed like a young girl. That was the only time you could hear her voice. Shots rang out in the night. Risa clung to the bars, and Farad, terrified, crouched down at the foot of the wall. Dustfinger pulled him to his feet again. It's nothing, he whispered. Just the guards taking pot shots at cats. They always do that when they're bored. The boy looked at him with disbelief, but Risa went on writing. She took the keys away to punish him. Dustfinger read, Basta won't like that at all. The way he acted with those keys, you'd have thought he was looking after Capricorn's most treasured possessions. Risa mimed taking a knife from her belt, looking so grim that Dustfinger almost laughed out loud. He quickly glanced around, but the yard was silent as the grave between its high walls. Oh yes, I can well imagine that Basta's furious, he whispered. In that mood, he'll do anything to please Capricorn. Slit throats, gash open faces, anything. Risa reached for the paper again, and once more took him a painfully long time to decipher her clear, neat writing. Oh, so you've heard about Silvertongue. You want to know who he is? Well, but for me, he'd still be locked up in Capricorn's sheds. What else? Ask Farad. Silvertongue plucked the boy out of his own story, too, like a ripe apple. Luckily, he didn't bring out any of the goals the boy keeps carrying on about. Yes, he reads aloud very well indeed, much better than Darius. As you can see, Farad doesn't limp. His face probably always looked the way it does now, and he still has his voice too, even if you might not think so at the moment. Farad cast him an angry glance. What does Silvertongue look like? Well, I can at least tell you that Basta hasn't decorated his face yet. A shutter creaked above them. Dustfinger pressed close to the grating. Only the wind, he thought, nothing but the wind. Farad was staring at him, eyes wide with fear. No doubt the creaking sounded to him like a demon, but the figure who leaned out of the window above them was a creature of flesh and blood. Mortola, or the magpie as she was secretly nicknamed. She was in charge of all the maids, and nothing was safe from the magpie's eyes and ears, not even the secrets the women whispered to each other in the bedrooms at night. Even Capricorn's strong boxes had better accommodations than his maidservants. They all slept in his house, 4 to a room, crammed in like sardines, except for those who had struck up a relationship with one of his men and moved on to another house. The magpie leaned over to the windowsill and breathed in the cool night. I need a drink. I'm so thirsty. How's the video quality? Decent? Good enough? I forgot I don't have to turn it. It's a straw. What does that mean? Weird. Why is this happening? Nice. This one saves my history. But this doesn't. That's what's weird. Not this one. Well, Oh, thank God. I want more coffee. Okay. The magpie leaned over the windowsill and breathed in the cool night air. She stayed there for what seemed to be an endless time, so long that Dustfinger could happily have wrung her neck, but finally she appeared to have filled every inch of her body with fresh air and closed the window. I must go, but I'll be back tomorrow evening. Maybe you'll have found out something about the book by then. Dustfinger squeezed Risa's hand. Her fingers were rough from laundry work and cleaning. I know I've said it before, but all the same, be careful and keep away from Basta. Risa shrugged her shoulders. How else could she respond to such unnecessary advice? Almost all the women in the village kept away from Basta, but he didn't keep away from them. Dustfinger waited outside the grating until Risa was back in her room. She signaled to him through the window with a candle. The guard in the parking lot still had his headphones on. Deep in his own thoughts, he was dancing among the cars, shotgun in his outstretched arms as if he were dancing with a girl. By the time he finally looked their way, the night had already swallowed up Dustfinger and Farid. They met no one on the way back to their hiding place, only a fox who slunk away with hunger in his eyes. Gwen was eating a bird inside the walls of the burnt-out cottage. Its feathers were shadows in the darkness. Has she always been mute? Asked the boy as Dustfinger lay down under the trees to sleep. As long as I've known her, replied Dustfinger, turning his back to the boy. Farid lay down beside him. He made this his habit from the first, and however often Dustfinger moved away, the boy was always close beside him when he woke up. The photograph in your backpack, he said. It is her. So? The boy did not reply. If you've taken a fancy to her, Dustfinger mocked him, forget it. She's one of Capricorn's favorite maids. She's even allowed to take him his breakfast and help him get dressed. How long has she been with him? 5 years, said Dustfinger, and in all that time, Capricorn has never once let her leave the village. She can't even go out of the house very often. She ran away twice, but she never got far. One of those times a snake bit her. She never told me how Capricorn punished her, but I know she never tried to run away again. There was a rustling behind them. Farid jumped, but it was only Gwen. The marten was licking his muzzle as he leaped and landed on the boy's stomach. Laughing, Farid plucked a feather out of his fur. Gwen snuffled busily around the boy's chin and nose as if he had missed him. Then he disappeared into the night again. He really is a nice marten, whispered Farid. No, he's not, said Dustfinger, pulling his thin blanket up to his chin. He probably likes you because you smell like a girl. Farid's only answer was a long silence. She looks like her, he said at last, just as Dustfinger was dropping off to sleep. Silvertongue's daughter, I mean. She has the same mouth and the same eyes, and she laughs in the same way. Nonsense, said Dustfinger. There's not the slightest resemblance. They both have blue eyes, that's all. It's not unusual here. Hurry up and go to sleep. The boy obeyed. He wrapped himself in the sweater that Dustfinger had given him and turned his back to his companion. Soon he was breathing as peacefully as a baby, but Dustfinger lay awake all night staring at the stars. Hey guys! Welcome in, guys. I don't know how many more chapters we're going to read. I don't know how long I've been reading, but we've only gotten through a few chapters because I've given so many recaps. I'll do at least one more chapter. Probably. It's taken a minute to get the group back together. I think they're going to be apart still for like some chapters. Okay. Chapter 34, Capricorn Secrets. This excerpt is from The Sword and the Stone by T.H. White. If I were to be made a knight, said the wart, staring dreamily into the fire, I should pray to God to let me encounter all the evil in the world in my own person, so that if I conquered, there would be none left, and if I defeated, there would be the one to suffer for it. That would be extremely presumptuous of you, said Merlin, and you would be conquered, and you would suffer for it. Capricorn received Meggie and Finoglio in the church. About a dozen of his men were with him. He was sitting in the new black leather armchair they had installed under Mortola's supervision, and this time for once his suit was not red but pale yellow, like in the morning daylight filtering in through the windows. He had them brought to him early, while the mist still hung above the hills, with the sun swimming in it like a ball floating in murky water. I need to get more comfy. I'm gonna turn this away. We're good. We're good. By all the letters of the alphabet, whispered Finoglio. Wait, how'd y'all fall over? Don got hypnotized. As he and Meggie walked down the nave of the church with Basta close behind them. He really does look exactly the way I imagined him, colorless as a glass of milk. That's kind of rude. I think that's how I put it. He began walking faster as if he couldn't wait to see his creation at close quarters. Meggie could hardly keep up with him, and Basta held him back before he had reached the steps. Here, what's the idea? He hissed. Not so fast, and bow, understand? Finoglio merely glanced scornfully at him and remained perfectly upright. Basta raised his hand, but when Capricorn almost imperceptibly shook his head, he lowered it again like a rebuked child. Mortola was standing beside Capricorn's chair, her arms folded like wings behind her back. You know, Basta, I still wonder what you were thinking of not to bring her father too, said Capricorn, letting his gaze wander from Meggie to Finoglio's turtle-like face. He wasn't there, I told you. Basta sounded injured. Was I supposed to sit around waiting for him like a toad beside a pond? He'll soon be here of his own accord. We all know how besotted he is with his daughter. I'll bet my knife he'll be here by tomorrow at the latest. Your knife? But you've already mislaid your knife once recently. The mockery in Mortola's voice made Basta grind his teeth. You're slipping, Basta, remarked Capricorn. Your hot temper clouds your judgment. But let's move to this other souvenir of yours. Finoglio had taken his eyes off Capricorn. He was looking at him like a painter seeing one of his pictures again. After many long years, and judging by the expression on his face, what he saw pleased him. Meggie couldn't see a trace of fear in his eyes, just incredulous curiosity and satisfaction with himself. She also saw that Capricorn did not care for that expression at all. He wasn't used to being inspected as fearlessly as this old man was scrutinizing him now, not even by his men. Basta has told me some strange things about you, Signor Finoglio. Meggie was watching Capricorn's face. Had he ever read the name on the cover of Inkheart, just below the title itself? Even his voice sounds the way I imagined. Finoglio whispered to her. She thought he was captivated, like a child looking at a caged lion. Except that Capricorn wasn't in a cage. At a signal from him, Basta jammed his elbow into the old man's back so roughly that Finoglio was left gasping for air. I don't like whispering in my presence, Capricorn said softly while Finoglio was still struggling to get his breath back. As I said, Basta has told me a strange story. He says you claim to be the man who wrote a certain book. What was its name again? Inkheart. Finoglio rubbed his aching back. Its title is Inkheart because it's about a man whose wicked heart is as black as ink, filled with darkness and evil. I still like the title. That's what we're reading. Capricorn raised his eyebrows and smiled. And how am I supposed to take that? As a compliment, maybe? After all, it's my story you're talking about. No, it's mine. You just appear in it. Maggie saw Basta looking inquiringly at Capricorn, but he shook his head again very slightly, and Finoglio's back was spared for the time being. How interesting. So you're sticking to your lies. Capricorn uncrossed his legs and rose from his chair. With slow strides, he came down the steps. Finoglio smiled conspiratorially at Maggie. What are you grinning for? Capricorn's voice was as sharp as Basta's knife now. He stopped right in front of Finoglio. Oh, I was only thinking that vanity is one of the qualities I gave you. Vanity and... Finoglio paused for effect before continuing. And a few other weaknesses that I expect you'd rather I didn't mention in front of your henchmen. Capricorn examined him in silence, a silence that seemed to last an eternity. Then he smiled. It was a faint, thin smile, little more than a lift at the corners of his mouth, while his eyes scanned the church as if he had entirely forgotten Finoglio. My voice is so tired already. I'm not used to reading anymore. You're a shameless old man, he said, and a liar in the bargain. But if you hope to impress me with your barefaced lying and boasting the way you've impressed Basta, I must disappoint you. Your claims are ridiculous, just as you are, and it was more than stupid of Basta to bring you here because now we have to get rid of you somehow. Basta turned pale. He hurried over to Capricorn, head lowered in submission. But suppose he isn't lying? Maggie heard him whisper to Capricorn. They both say we will all die if we touch the old man. Capricorn gave him a look of such contempt that Basta flinched backwards as if he had been struck. Finoglio, however, looked as if he were enjoying himself hugely. It seemed to Maggie that he was watching the whole scene as if it were a play performed especially for him. Poor Basta, he said to Capricorn, you're doing him a great injustice again, for he's right. Suppose I'm not lying. Suppose I really did invent you both, you and Basta. Will you simply dissolve into thin air if you do anything to me? It seems very likely. Capricorn laughed, but Maggie sensed he was thinking over what Finoglio had said, and it made him uneasy. Even if he was taking great pains to hide his concern under a mask of indifference. I can prove what I say I am, said Finoglio, so quietly that apart from Capricorn only Basta could hear his words. Shall I do it here in front of your men and all those women? Shall I tell them about your parents? All was quiet in the church now. No one moved, neither Basta nor the other men waiting at the foot of the steps. Even the women cleaning the floor under the table straightened up to look at Capricorn and the strange old man. Mortola was standing beside his chair, her chin jutting out as if that would help her to hear what they were whispering about. Capricorn inspected his cufflinks in silence. They were like drops of blood on his pale shirt. Then at last he turned his colorless eyes to Finoglio's face again. So, say what you like, old man, but if you value your life, say it so that only I can hear. He spoke softly, but Maggie heard the fury in his voice, suppressed with difficulty but lurking behind every word. She had never felt more afraid of him. Capricorn signed to Basta, who reluctantly took a few steps backward. I suppose the child can hear what I have to say? Asked Finoglio, putting his hands on Maggie's shoulder. Or are you afraid of her too? Capricorn did not even look at Maggie. He had eyes only for the old man who had invented him. Well, come on, let's hear you. Even if you have nothing to say, you're not the first person to try saving a skin in this church with a few lies, but if you hedge your bets any longer, I'll tell Basta to wrap a pretty little viper around your neck. I always keep a few around the place for such occasions. Even this threat didn't particularly impress Finoglio. Very well, he said, looking all around him as if sorry not to have a larger audience. Where shall I begin? First, something basic. A storyteller never writes down everything he knows about his characters. There's no need for readers to know everything. Some of it's better kept secret between the author and his creations. Take him, for instance, he added, pointing to Basta. I always knew he was a very unhappy boy before you picked him up. As it says in another very fine book, it's terribly easy to persuade children that are worthless. Basta was convinced of it. Not that you taught him any better, oh no, why would you? But suddenly here was someone to whom he could devote himself. Someone who told him what to do. He'd found a god, Capricorn, and if you treated him badly, well, who says that all gods are kindly? Most of them are stern and cruel, wouldn't you agree? I didn't write all this in the book. I knew it. That was enough. But never mind Basta now, let's move on to you. Capricorn's eyes did not move from Finoglio. His face was as rigid as it had turned to stone. Capricorn. Finoglio's voice sounded almost tender as he spoke the name. He gazed over Capricorn's shoulder as if he had forgotten that the man he was talking about was standing right in front of him and no longer existed, only in an entirely different world between the covers of a book. He has another name too, of course, but even he doesn't remember it. He has called himself Capricorn since he was 15, after the star under which he was born. Capricorn, the unapproachable, unfathomable, insatiable, who likes to play God or the devil as the fancy takes him. The devil doesn't have a mother, though, does he? Finoglio then looked Capricorn in the eye. But you do. Meggie looked up at the magpie. She had come to the edge of the steps, listening, her bony hands clenched into fists. You like to spread the rumor that she was of noble birth, Finoglio went on. Indeed, it sometimes even pleases you to say she was a king's daughter. And your father, you claim, was an armorer at her father's court. A very nice story, too. Shall I tell you my version? For the first time, Meggie saw something like fear on Capricorn's face, a nameless fear without beginning or end, and behind it hatred rose like a vast black shadow. Meggie felt sure Capricorn wanted to strike Finoglio to the ground, but his fear was too strong, leaving him helpless to act. Did Finoglio see that too? Go on, tell your story, why not? Capricorn's eyes were unblinking like a snake's. Finoglio smiled as mischievously as one of his grandsons. Very well, let's go on. The tale of the court armorer was all lies, of course. Meggie still had a feeling that the old man was enjoying himself enormously. He might have been teasing a kitten. Did he know so little about his own creation? Capricorn's father was an ordinary blacksmith, he went on, refusing to let the cold rage in Capricorn's eyes distract him. He made his son play with hot coals, and sometimes he beat him almost as hard as he beat the iron he forged. There were blows if the boy ever showed pity, and more blows for shedding tears. And for every time the lad said, I can't, or I'll never do it, power is all that counts, he taught his son. Rules are made for the strongest, so be sure that you're the one who makes them. That's fucked up. Capricorn's mother thought that was the only real truth in the world, and she told her son day in, day out that one day he would be the strongest of all. She was no princess, but a serving maid, with coarse hands and roughened knees, and she followed her son like a shadow, even when he began to be ashamed of her and invented a new mother and new father for himself. She admired him for his cruelty. She loved to see the terror he spread abroad, and she loved his ink-black heart. Your heart is a stone, Capricorn, a black stone with about as much human sympathy as a lump of coal, and you are very, very proud of that. Capricorn went on playing with his cufflink, turning it around and looking at it as intently as if he were giving all his attention not to Finoglio's words, but to the little red piece of metal. When the old man fell silent, Capricorn carefully pulled a sleeve of his jacket down over his wrist and brushed a speck of fluff on his arm. With it, he seemed to have brushed off his anger. His pale, indifferent eyes no longer showed rage, hatred, or fear. "That really is an amazing story, old man," he said in a quiet voice. "I like it. You're a born liar, so I shall keep you here for the time being until I tire of your stories." "Keep me here?" Finoglio stood very straight. "I have no intention of staying here. What on earth?" But Capricorn put a hand over his mouth. "Not another word," he hissed. "Basta has told me about your 3 grandchildren. If you give me any trouble or tell your lies not to me, but to my men, I shall get Basta to gift wrap a few young vipers and leave them outside your grandchildren's door. Do I make myself clear, old man?" Dude, my voice is so tired. I sound like shit. I feel like we've been reading for we've been reading for an hour. Holy shit. We're almost done with this chapter, though. Oh yeah, almost done. Finoglio's head drooped as if Capricorn had broken his neck with nothing but a few softly spoken words. When he looked up again, fear showed in every wrinkle of his face. With a satisfied smile, Capricorn put his hands in his pants pockets. "Yes, you all have something, soft-hearted as you are," he said. "Children, grandchildren, brothers and sisters, parents, dogs, cats, canary birds, there are no exceptions. Farmers, shopkeepers, even policemen have families, or at least keep a dog. You have only to look at her father." Capricorn pointed at Maggie so suddenly she jumped. "He'll come here, and even though he knows I won't let him go again, any more than I will let his daughter go, he'll come all the same. Isn't the world an amazing place?" "Amazing indeed," murmured Finoglio, and for the first time he looked at his creation with revulsion rather than admiration. Capricorn seemed to prefer that. "Basta," he called, beckoning him. Basta strolled over deliberately slowly. He was still looking sulky. "Take the old man to the room where we once locked Darius," Capricorn ordered, "and post a guard outside the door." "You want me to take him into your house?" Basta sounded surprised. "Yes, why not? After all, he claims to be almost like a father to me. Anyway, his tales amuse me." He's scared. Basta shrugged and grasped Finoglio's arm. Maggie looked at the old man, horrified. She would soon be all alone with nothing but the windowless walls and a locked door. But Finoglio reached for her hand before Basta could haul him away. "Leave the girl with me," he said to Capricorn. "You can't shut her up in that hole again all by herself, and I promised her father I'd look after her." Capricorn turned his back, looking indifferent. "As you like. Her father will be here soon in any case." Yes, Mo would come. Maggie could think of nothing else as Finoglio led her away with him, his arm around her shoulders as if he really could protect her from Capricorn and Basta and all the others. But he couldn't. Will Mo be able to protect her? Of course not. He mustn't come, she thought. Please. Perhaps he won't be able to find the way again. He mustn't come. Yet there was nothing she wanted more, nothing in the whole wide world. So, time flies by. Seriously, we read a whole hour. Look at how far we got. Not far at all.